Okay. All right. So I'm recording this. If you guys want, I will send it. I'll send it out, and you guys can rewatch if you want. All right. So here, what we have is a end user, who is going to come to your product. He's going to do some interaction with your product. Okay. So the user interface can be also many different technologies, but let's go with user interface for now. I'm going to come back to what are the different types of user interfaces. So the user comes in, interfaces with your product. Behind the scenes, there can be many services, many products, many different functionality available. Okay, so one of that may be user account information, user creation information. Okay, so the user is searching for a product. Let's say the user wants to buy a bicycle. Okay, so he search in the search can be a different service. Okay, so he does a search, that's completely different service. Okay, so once he selects a product he wants to buy, so the buying itself, you have to create a cart, you have to add it to the cart, you have to figure out what is the sales tax, you have to select a bunch of shipping methods and all that. Okay, so that can be a different service. Okay, so at a high level, the user is coming in, interacting with your product. Behind the scenes, there can be many services, each having its own specialty. Behind the scenes, every service can have its own database, or all of this can be going to the same database, or even one microservice can go to many databases also. Okay, the reason why you have this middleware, which is a microservice. So we call this a middleware. Okay, so this is the front end, which is the user interface. Okay, and then you have this database, which is considered similar to a backend kind of. So when we say Python guys mostly are in middleware and backend, what we mean is the Python is mostly over here, microservices interacting with the databases. Okay, connecting to databases, pulling data and all that kind of stuff. Okay, okay. Now coming to the high level picture again, why do we need these components? Okay, so the user interface can be JavaScript. Okay, that means it can be a web module. That means the user is interacting with a web browser. It can be Explorer, it can be Chrome, or Firefox, or whatever the browser can be. Okay, or it can be like Android device application, right? In an Android app or maybe a Apple app, you don't have a web interface. You have the actual application itself. Sometimes they have their own a UI, which is a native UI, or it can be like a device, let's say a GPS device. Okay, so there's no Android, there is no Apple or any operating system there. I mean, there is an operating system, but pretty much these are the not standard operating systems. So you have something like a Qt QML. Okay, so there are different kind of UI user interfaces, so that can have its own technology, in the sense we don't want to deal with how the user is interacting with it. We want to deal with the data that is being sent to the user interface. Okay, so that is where the microservices come into the picture. How do I talk to the user interface? Okay, so there are different protocols that are used. So some of them are JSON. Okay, and some of them are XML, and there are other protocols also, but these are the two primary protocols that are being used. Okay, so if I show you an example of a JSON. Okay, okay, so this is a perfect example, right? So on the left hand side, or let me open in a new window. So this is a good example here. Okay, so what you have is, this is how a JSON looks like. Okay, so if you see, you have a orders. This square bracket means it's a list. Okay, I'm going to talk about those in detail, but there are a bunch of orders, and it has an order number, a date, a tracking number, customer ID, and you also have some customer information, customer ID, first name, last name, and so on. So a JSON, you can think of key value pairs. Okay, so you have a key and a corresponding value. The key is order number. The value is this number, 748, and so on. Date is the key, and the value of the date is this. Okay, tracking number is the key. The value of tracking number is this. Okay, so this is how a JSON looks like. Okay, and a XML. Okay, so I'm gonna Open this XML. Okay, so this is how an XML looks like. Okay, in an XML, you have pretty much similar to JSON, but you have the opening tag and you have a closing tag. Okay, for everything, you have an opening tag and a closing tag and all that. Okay, now the interesting thing about XML is that you know exactly. Yeah, fine. So interesting thing about XML is that you see number here 2712. Okay, if you go to JSON, so here you can see everything is a key value pair. Okay, so here you say zip 68003. Okay, and you put a double quotes around it. When you put double quotes, that means it's a string. Okay, when you don't have double quotes, that means it's a number. Okay, so you know the difference between a string and a number by looking at the double quotes. Okay, if there are double quotes, that means it's a string. If there are no double quotes, that means it's a string. Sorry, yeah, it's a number. Okay, so here customer ID is a string. It's not a number. Order number is a string. Actually, it's not a number. Okay, so if you go back to XML, there are no double quotes. Yeah, there is no special concept as this is string, that's a number. But yeah, pretty much at a high level, you have an opening tag and you have a closing tag. Okay. Now, if you look at this guy, which is a customer number 2712, is it really a number or is it a string? Okay. So we're gonna come back to how to differentiate between a string and a number. Okay. Okay. So this is JSON and XML. So why am I talking about different JSON and XMLs formats? Okay. So this microservice here can communicate with the user interface using different protocols. This guy can talk to the user interface using JSON. This service can talk to the user interface using XML. Um, but the picture, or in the sense, the concept is that this microservice can be in Python. The user interface can be in JavaScript. This microservice can be in C++. This user interface can be in Qt QML. Okay, this microservice can be in Java, and the user interface can be Android device. Okay, so whatever it can be, there is a disconnection between the middleware and the front end. Okay, and they communicate using a standard protocol. The standard protocol is XML, or it can be JSON. Okay, so the microservice is sending a JSON object to the user interface. Let it decide how it wants to show. Okay. Similarly, this microservice sending XML. Let the user interface decide how it wants to interact and so on. Okay. So the advantage is that tomorrow I can replace this microservice with another microservice, and I don't have to worry about changing the user interface. The user interface will remain the same because it's expecting a JSON data and it is giving back JSON data. From its point of view, nothing changed. Okay. And similarly, you have a database behind the scenes. Now, most of you know what a database is, but at a high level, a database is nothing but a storage system. Okay, it can be even a file system. Okay, you can have a bunch of data in files, or you can have a database, MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL, Microsoft SQL Server, Teradata. It can be any of the databases. All the databases are pretty similar. Okay, you have a bunch of tables. There are relationship between the tables and so on. Okay, we'll talk about databases, different type of databases in a minute, or yeah, so we'll talk about it. But yeah, behind the scenes, you have a database where all the information is stored. Okay, you can have maybe 100 different tables. The microservice is going to pull the data from the tables. It's going to give it to the user interface. Okay, so there are a bunch of connectors that every language provides. Python has a MySQL connector, Oracle connector. Pretty much any database that you want to connect, you got a connector to connect to the database and pull the data. Okay, so we're going to look at some examples in the next classes, but here I want to give you a bigger picture. Okay, now another interesting thing is you see a small arrow here, microservice to microservice. They are actually communicating. Here it may be, in some cases it may be communicating, but in some cases there may not be any communication between one service and another service. Okay, now this small arrow here means many things. Okay, so the user can search for a product. Okay, and he searched for a product, he clicked on a product. Now he wants to buy the product. Okay, so the product information, or this service is taking care of a cart, shopping cart. Okay, so he has to pay some sales tax, all that kind of information, but he wants to know the product information. Okay, so that information can come from a different microservice. Okay, so the second microservice here in the picture is specialized in looking at. Um, by the way, can you guys see the mouse moving actually?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So the second microservice is pretty much dedicated for a product information, searching the products and all that kind of stuff. Okay. The third microservice is pretty much dedicated for, let's say, finding out the sales tax or what are the other information. Okay. So if this service wants to find some product information, let's say certain products are not sold to certain countries. Okay, so you're not supposed to sell to Iran or maybe Russia, or maybe the company doesn't want to sell outside the country. Okay, somebody coming in placing an order, you want to find out whether the product is available to be sold in that country. So that's a product information. Okay, so you want to go to this microservice, get some information, come back and give it to the user saying, hey, you cannot add this to the cart, even though you can look at the product and all that. So there can be sometimes communication between the microservices. Okay, so that is the small arrow here. Okay, it's not necessary that they are communicating, but it might be. Okay, so this at a high level. Before I drill down into more details, do you guys have any questions so far? If you have questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can post it on the chat also. Okay. All right. So if no questions, then okay. All right. If no questions, then let's move on. So okay. So now microservice, right? So here, microservices is very interesting. Now let's say there are thousands of users that are coming in and trying to hit your service. Okay. Now what happens to your microservice? It gets loaded. How do we scale it up? How do we scale it down? And so on, right? So there are these kind of challenges there. On the other hand, the database might be overloaded. That means the microservice is fast enough that it can connect to a database, pull the data, but the database, on the other hand, cannot handle all these requests. Do we cache the data? I'm going to talk about caching the data and all that. But yeah, there are different challenges involved. Sometimes it may be that you have 10 microservices, and these microservices, one of them is down. Okay, the user already connected to it. What happens? Okay, the user comes in, logs in. Okay, the next request is going to this microservice. Okay, how does this microservice know that he already authenticated? That means he did a sign in or a login, and now how do we know that we are supposed to give the product information out? Okay, so what happens? How does this microservice know that the user has already authenticated? Okay, so we'll look at a few things. Okay, so coming to the yeah, so it can also be that what you're looking at the picture, all these microservices can be the same microservice. That means when a user logs in, he can go to any of these microservices. All these are the same microservices, and the load is balanced in such a way that when he logs in, he might go here. The next user that logs in can go to this machine here. Okay, it's running the same code, and behind the scenes, there can be distributed database where one microservice is connecting to one database, another microservice is connecting to a different database. Okay, there can be different combinations of setup. Okay, yeah. So depending on how it is configured and what are the things that are involved there, we can go into the details. But this at a high level. Okay, now we said user interface can be JavaScript and so on, right? So let's talk about few technologies there. Okay, so you have at the very basic level, you have a native JavaScript. Okay, okay, so a very native JavaScript means that you're gonna have your own. So JavaScript at a high level supports a bunch of things. Okay, so it's just like any other programming language. Okay, but it has certain things like a combo box. It has certain things like a signals handling, functionality, and so on. Okay, so if I look for some JavaScript examples. Okay, okay. So as you can see that This is HTML and JavaScript in there. Okay. The front end, pretty much as you know, is HTML and is a web page. Okay, so you have HTML there, and you also can have CSS. CSS is a styling sheet. That means, yeah, let me show you HTML versus CSS. I'm going to show you a difference between HTML page and a CSS page. Okay. It's not that you can replace HTML with CSS. You need both the components. Okay. You cannot. Most people think instead of HTML, I can use maybe CSS kind of stuff, but you need both. Okay. Yeah, I think this picture is the best representation. Oh, sorry. Okay, call it. So you can see that HTML is pretty much giving you at a high level. These are the components that are involved there. Okay, styling sheet is like, do I want a frame around it? Is it scrollable? Is it in the sense? Do you want to make it when the user clicks on a link? Do you want to change the color of the link to orange or blue or something else? Okay, so that is a styling sheet. Okay, all that is taken care by the CSS. Okay, HTML is more like these are the components that are involved there. There's a combo box, maybe there is a grid, but it doesn't say, it doesn't have a particular style associated. Okay, so you need both the components, HTML and CSS. Now what happens when a user clicks on a combo box? By the way, let me talk what a combo box and widgets are. Maybe some people here don't know. Okay, HTML widgets. This is best actually. Yeah. All right, so you see here, this is a text entry. Okay, that means you can enter a bunch of text, and that is called a text entry widget. Okay, this is a checkbox. Okay, that means you can click on unclick on this. That's called a checkbox. Okay, and this you see when I click on it. Sorry, when I click on it, you will get a bunch of options. You can select one of the option, but you cannot type in anything you want. Okay, so text entry here means that you can enter anything you want. In a combo box, you have to select one of the option there. Okay, and this is a mix of combo box and a text entry. Okay, that means you can enter whatever you want, but at the same time, you can also use the increment and decrement operators widget here. Okay. Yeah, so this at the bottom, you see this? This is a multi-line text. Okay, the first one is a text entry. The next one at the very bottom is a multi-line text entry. Okay, so these are called widgets. Okay, so you have different widgets, and these are all supported on the front end side. Okay, now what happens when the user presses submit? This is a button. Okay, so when the user presses a submit button, you want to do some things. Okay, so that is where the JavaScript comes into the picture. Okay, JavaScript says, okay, the user clicked a button, button clicked handler, the function gets called, and the function pretty much does something. Okay, it goes to the microservice. When the user clicks a button, it goes. That's when it goes to the microservice. Okay, so that going to the microservice is written in JavaScript. Okay, so that is the plain or native JavaScript. Okay. Now you have something called AngularJS. Okay, so what AngularJS does is it makes it easy for you. Okay, that means instead of me having a button and me writing a JavaScript code and so on, and let's say I have another another web page that has same thing. Pretty much user is coming and entering some information and is pressing a submit button. Pretty much the same code and everything. Okay. So I have to replicate this JavaScript code again and again in a different web page because that's a different page, right? Instead of that, what AngularJS says is you can write a class and you can reuse that particular class. Okay, so there are some components. So yeah, you can see you can associate a component. Okay, so in this particular case, you write a function, and that function is the one that is getting called all the time. Okay, so that is AngularJS. Okay, At the same time, you have something called a React.js. So Angular is more of, I would say, there's a model associated to it, and you reuse the model. Okay. React is also similar in the sense it has a different approach. It has components, classes. You write a class. React is more of object-oriented programming. Um, but yeah, you pretty much write a class. Everything is class-based. Okay, so you write a class, and you take care of what you want to do. In a render, render is what is going to be displayed. Here, they are showing a div. Div is pretty much like a you can think of pretty much a paragraph kind of stuff with a frame around it. Okay, so that in the sense that this is going to show this text. Okay, so React is pretty much class based, while Angular is more of model, ng models kind of stuff and so on. We don't need to go into all the details, but two primary frameworks for the front end are AngularJS and React.js. Okay, now going back to microservice. Okay, so that's on the user interface. There's also another one which is Qt-QML. This is mostly used for native UI. Native means, let's say you have a let's say you have thermostat. Okay, thermostat, Nest thermostat, or maybe some other device that doesn't have a proper, in the sense you want to have your own native UI. Okay, for those kind of stuff, the organizations use something called Qt-QML. Okay, so this is so let's say you have something like this. Okay, so this module here that you're going to show it up as a meter, and so on. So this all using Qt-QML. Okay, okay, something like this. Okay, or maybe, okay, this perfect example actually. Okay, so you can see this. This is a meter here. It's showing some numbers. This is not running on a web page. This is not running on your mobile device. This is not running. This it's not a proper standard device. Or you can assume that you can see if you go to FedEx, they scan your machine, or sorry, they scan your package, and the machine has a screen on the top with a bunch of buttons on the left side, right side, kind of stuff. They can press buttons. So all those UIs are Qt-QML. Okay. So in those kind of native devices, they use Qt-QML. Okay. If you guys have any questions, post it on the chat. I'll look at the chat once in a while. Okay. Okay. So that is on the user interface, right? Now coming to microservices, you have ton of options here. Okay. So people can use Python, can use C++, Java, Go language. Pretty much you can use any. I mean, these are the standard languages, but there are many frameworks out there. Okay. So if I want to use a Python as my primary language, what are my options? Okay, so you have something called a Django uh, framework. Okay, all right. So this is one of the framework for Python. Okay, so if you have Django, what does it provide you? Okay, so if I have a Django framework, what it provides me is it helps me talk to a database. It helps me send a JSON data back. I can just concentrate on the business logic. I can just say, hey, return this response, and Django will take care of sending that response out. That means it will take care of socket connections. It will take care of if I want to pull some data from database. It will take care of connecting to the database, pulling the data, and all that stuff. Okay, so I don't have to worry about the low-level stuff. We can concentrate on the business logic. Okay, so if user is calling, get me this product information, what should I do? If the user is saying add this product to the shopping cart, okay, so what should I do? So we concentrate on the business logic, and the low level information is taken care by the Django framework. Okay, now there's another framework called very similar to Django, which is called Flask. Okay, yep. Okay, all right, so Flask is also similar to Django, but there are a few things that Flask doesn't support. We have to take care of some other modules. We have to, like, connecting to a database. It doesn't do that. Okay, so there is another there's another module that we have to use, which is called hold on. Yeah, this is called SQL Alchemy. Yeah, I don't want to go into too many details, but Flask is another option. Okay, so if you're on Go language, some people here might be from Go language. Go is something Google built, and it's pretty good. So Go language has a standard module called HTTP module. Okay, uh, here Django and Flask are outside the Python environment. That means you have to install Django, you have to install Flask, and then you have to write some code there. Okay, in a Go language, these are not outside packages. These are part of the language. Okay, that means you're not installing anything else. If you install Go language, that's it. You get a HTTP module, and you can use that for processing your request responses and all that. Okay. Uh, you also have C++. You also have Java and all these languages. I don't see anyone from Java here. Let me just confirm that. Yeah. Okay. Alright. So those are the that's what the middleware microservice is. Okay. Now coming to the database, what are the different databases you have? Okay. So there are at the very high level there are two type of databases. One is relational, and the other one is no non-relational or NoSQL databases. Okay. Okay. So what you have here is let me check this. Yeah. Okay. So think of relational as a SQL database, okay? Because you are using SQL to interact with the database. You're going to say select star from, or you're going to say insert into, update records, delete records, and all that, okay? So that's all SQL, okay? So whenever you, I mean, you can use select here also, but at a relational database, there are relationships, okay? That means you have a product information. These tables are not good. Okay, let me just open something else. Okay, this is perfect. Okay. Okay, so here there's a table called store. It only has store information. Okay, so you have a store which is in New York, the region is East Coast. Okay, you have a store in Chicago, that's Central region. So it's only information. I mean, the table is storing only the information of the store. Okay, and then you have product information that is only stored in the product table. I mean, that table only has a product information. You have product ID, product key, the description of the product, and the brand of the product. Okay, and then there is a sales table that has which store, which product, how much was the sale made for, what was the cost, what is the profit, and all that. Okay, so there's another table that has the relationship between these two tables. Okay, that means the store key is a foreign key relationship to the store. Okay, the product key is a foreign key relationship to the product table. Okay, so now you have the relationships between one table and another table. Okay, so this is a traditional relational database. Okay, what are APIs? Okay, so yeah, so API pretty much means that this user interface is going to interact with this microservice, right? How does it interact? That interaction is called API. Okay, that means application programming interface. Okay, API pretty much means that application programming interface. Okay, so it's not a user interface, but it's pretty much an application is talking to another application. Okay, so here this user interface application is talking to this microservice. Okay, so that is an API. Okay, so this application is talking to this application. That is the interface. Okay, that means this is called application programming interface. It's like one program is talking to another program. Okay, and that is the interface that we are exposing. Okay, uh, at a very high level, this is what I'm gonna come back and discuss the details of what a API look like and what are the details involved. You have GET request, put, post, patch, delete, different kind of requests. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Yeah, APIs will come back to that. So let me finish at a high level, and then we're going to go into details. Okay? So now you have the relationship between the tables, all this. Okay, so this is a relational database. Now you have different kind of databases. You have MySQL, which is a industry standard free software. Okay, you also have PostgreSQL. PostgreSQL is also free. You have Oracle. Oracle is pretty expensive. Very few at one point, Oracle, a lot of companies used to use Oracle, but now very few companies are using it. Microsoft SQL Server, again, a pretty expensive product. There are a few companies that are using Microsoft SQL Server. There's Teradata. There is there are a bunch of databases out there. Okay. Now coming to NoSQL databases. Yeah, so let me do MongoDB. Okay, so MongoDB is one of the database that is NoSQL database. Okay, so we saw that in the previous case we have three different tables. Okay, which is a store table, product table, and a sales table. Okay, now in a NoSQL database you have only one table. Everything is stored in this table. Okay, so here you can see customer information is stored here, right here. Okay. There's no concept of columns. Okay, so here you have columns: store key column, city column, region column. Same thing for sales. You have sales column and all this, right? Over here, there is no such concept as a column. It's all key value pair. It's pretty much a JSON data. Okay, so you can insert any JSON data you want. So you can insert something like a first name, last name, and this is the address. Okay, you can insert another record that has nothing to do with this first name, last name. Okay. I'm trying to find some good examples. Okay. Fine. Yeah, going back to this example, everything is a key value pair. Okay, so I can insert another JSON document into the same table. Okay, in NoSQL database, we don't call it a table; we call it a collection. Okay, collection of documents. Okay, this what you're looking at is a Word document. Every JSON you can think of it as a document. Okay, they call it a document. Here document means that a single row. Okay, so this information, if I put in a JSON and insert in a MongoDB, this becomes a collection. Okay, the second row becomes another collection. Second row becomes another what did I say? Collection. A collection is a table, and this becomes a document. Okay, the second row is a document, third one is another document, and so on. Okay, so these are all bunch of documents. The table itself is a collection. Collection means a collection of documents. Okay. So they don't call it a table, they don't call it rows, they call it a collection with a bunch of documents. You can store any document in there. So in the same table, in the same collection, I can store information. In the same collection, I can store product records, product documents. I can store sales documents and all that in the same collection. Okay. So MongoDB pretty much has one collection, and you put everything in that one collection. Okay. And then when you query based on certain things. You say, hey, do I have a store column? If I have a region column, give me those records. If I have profit column, give me those records. Okay. So when you extract the data, that's when you figure out, is it a sales record? Is it a store record? But yeah, pretty much at a high level, you don't have different tables. You have only one collection, and you store all these documents in that one collection. Okay. So that is pretty much a NoSQL database. Okay. So there are some advantages and disadvantages. We can come back to that. But yeah, that is on the database side. Okay, so you have different sorts of databases, and the microservice is interacting with the database, pulling information, and then giving it to the user interface. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, I see a question there. What's an example of microservices communicating among themselves? Yep. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, so let's say you have some product information, and this microservice is giving you only product information. Okay, so the product has this dimensions. So let me open some Amazon website. Okay, so let's say you click on some t-shirts. Okay, okay, so this t-shirt information, this is a microservice. Okay, so there is a service behind the scenes that is giving me this price information, that is giving me there are different options for colors. Okay, it has a product description, it has different sizes. All this comes from that microservice. Okay, now as soon as I say add to cart, okay, that add to cart option is a different microservice. Okay, that means now the cart microservice needs to have access to the product information. Okay, so that microservice is going to go to the product microservice, and it's going to say, hey, give me the information for this product. What is the price? Am I supposed to ship it to this person in this country? Okay, sometimes you may be able to look at the Amazon, let's say a different country of Amazon, but when you try to add a product, it will say, hey, you're from a different country, you cannot add this product to your cart, and all that. Okay, so that is an example. I mean, this shipping information is a different microservice, a product information is a different microservice, and this service wants to get some information from this guy. So that's one example there. Okay, so the other examples are, um, let's say you're a financial company. Okay, in the sense you're a banking sector. Okay, in a banking sector, you wanna, let's say you wanna wire some money to another person. Okay, you open up, you look at your account details, everything is fine. Now you say send wire. Okay, so you click on the send wire option, and then it shows up some Swift code and all that kind of stuff. Okay, now you put a country like Iran or some other country outside the country. Okay, the bank can enforce certain things. Okay, so those enforcements can be done by a different microservice. Okay, there can be a different service that pretty much says, hey, somebody wants to send this money to this particular person or a country, is that okay? So all those rules and regulations can be a different microservice. Sending the money itself can be a different microservice. Okay, so this guy goes there and says, hey, is it okay to send this? If he says okay, then we allow this transaction. If this microservice says not okay, then this will block this. Okay, so that can be one interaction between one microservice and another microservice. I mean, there are many examples. We don't want to put everything into one microservice, okay? Because the rules and regulations change every often. Yeah, as soon as yeah. So let's say you put a country on a sanctions list, okay? Like Iran, okay? So the government, U.S. government, can change the rules and regulations whenever they want, okay? And let's say you are a global company. There are many countries out there. Every day there can be some rules and regulations that are changing. You want to have a dedicated microservice that just takes care of these rules and regulations. Okay, and another microservice that takes care of dedicated to the actual functionality itself. How do I send? Um, how do I check whether the money, the balance is there or not, and so on. Okay, I mean, I'm giving you an example here, but there can be many use cases. Okay, so yeah, so that's those are the different databases you have, different microservices and different user interfaces. Okay, so what I have spoken so far is the web development. Okay, but there can be other applications. I'm going to talk about other applications. If you guys have any questions, you can ask me now. Okay, so some of the other applications are this. Okay, so you don't have a user interface, you don't have a microservice, but you have a database where a bunch of data is stored. Okay, that means somebody comes in, brought some product, you have a sales. Okay. Now some business person comes in and says, hey, um, I want to know at what time I have the most sales. Or somebody can come in and say, hey, can you generate a report of how much profit I made last day or last month? Or they can say, can you give me a report of the sales numbers for the last every month or for the last 1 year? Okay, they want to see certain things. They want to look at, are we increasing the sales? Are we decreasing the sales? There can be different kind of reports. Okay, that means there is no user interface, there is no microservice. You just want to go to database and get the data and generate a report. Okay, so for those kind of cases, we call them. There are many names, but something like data analytics. Okay, what you're doing there is pretty much dealing with the data. Okay, you just have a bunch of data and you want to generate some information or some report out of it. You want to analyze the data. Okay, or it can be that you have some services. Okay, so you have some services that are saying that, hey, I have an error here, or some yeah, taking the example of a rules and regulations approach. The user tried to do this, send this money, but I'm going to block him, and that's going to put in the information saying into the database saying, hey, I just blocked this user. Okay, and we want to generate a report saying that, or maybe there's a US regulation that says you have to report to the US every fraudulent activity, or if the bank suspects that it's fraudulent. Okay, so there is no interaction there. We're just going to go to the database and look up certain records, and then we're going to generate a report. And that report, or a fraud report, or whatever you want to call a regulatory report, that report is the one that is going to be submitted to the regulators. Okay, so you have different kind of reports. Some of them are internal reports, some of them are external reports. But pretty much at a high level, you want to analyze some things by just looking at the data. Okay, there are no interactions from user and so on. Okay, that is data analytics. Okay, now again, there are different frameworks that provide you this. Some of them are something like, uh, let's go with pandas first. Let's start with pandas. Okay, so what pandas does, okay, so what pandas does is, it helps you analyze the data in a nice way. In a sense, this is not a high, um, yeah, if you know database SQL, like how to interact, how to write select statements and so on, you can pretty much use pandas directly right away, because how to deal with data, everything is part of pandas package. And since you know SQL, you also pretty much understand what is pandas. Okay, so what pandas framework does is, you can read from different sources. You can read from databases, you can read from files. Yeah, pretty much you can have any data source, and at the end of the day, it gives you a SQL approach. Okay, that means you can say, give me all records that have this number greater than 8, or in between 8 and 9. Okay, or some position which is a PG, or age less than 18 years. Okay, so it can help you filter, it can help you transform the data. So if you have not a number, if you don't have a number, you can transform that, saying that, okay, I'm going to assume that that user is 20 years old. Okay, if you don't have a number here, you can transform that data to something else. Okay, so you can do some transformations, you can do filtering, you can finally, if you're happy with the data, you can actually generate a report out of it. Okay, so pandas is a framework that helps you analyze your data. Okay, okay, so this is a nice picture here. Yeah, there are too many components here. You may not be interested in all of them. So Python is a language here. Pandas is going to help you generate the data. That means it can filter some data. Okay, but once you filter, you want to generate a graph. Okay, so matplotlib is the one that can help you generate a graph. Okay, so the business person comes in, says, give me a pie chart. Okay, so for people who don't know what a pie chart is, this is what it looks like. It's a round diagram, and it pretty much gives you a certain information. Okay, so you have a pie chart here. It looks like a pie, and you have different data there that says for January you made 30% sales, for February you made 10%, or whatever the information. Okay, so it displays this. So now if I want to generate this image using Python, you can use something called matplotlib. Okay, so that is what's going to help you generate the plots, bar graphs, pie charts. You can even generate three-dimensional charts also. Okay, all that using matplotlib. But matplotlib can only generate graph. Okay, but to extract the data, you need pandas. Pandas can extract the data, do the filtering transformation, and then it can give it to matplotlib, and that can generate a report. Okay, let's not look at all this. It might be too confusing. So just minimize this. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. So data analytics is another completely different, I would say, different technology or a library or so on that pretty much deals with the data. Okay. You don't have user interfaces. You don't have the middleware and all that kind of stuff. And good thing about data analytics is that one of the good thing about the data analytics is that there is no, I would say, uh, penalty for slow processing. Okay, so if you want to generate a report saying what is your sales number last month or before month or per year and so on, it can run for 2 minutes, it can run for 5 minutes. I mean, it's not like a user is waiting there for you to generate a report. Okay, so it can be I mean, the performance doesn't come into the picture right away, but the functionality comes into the picture. That means they want to generate the exact numbers. So the functionality is more important than the performance side. Okay, so most of the times when you're dealing with the reports, um, nobody says, "Hey, I want the report in 2 minutes. I want the report in 2 minutes 30 seconds." Nobody says that. All they want is generate a report, and that's it. Okay. When you talk with the users, that's when the performance comes into picture. Okay, that means you want to process this request in maybe less than 1 second or less than 200 milliseconds. Okay, because now you have thousands of millions of users that are accessing your microservice. You don't want to sit on a single request for 1 second or 2 seconds because since there are millions of users, or they're going to be pretty pissed off. But because your website is so slow, so there are performance considerations when it comes to microservices. But when you go to data analytics side, performance takes a back seat. Okay, that's one, I would say, one bright side of it. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean that you're going to write a crappy code when it comes to data analytics. But still, if the report takes a little longer, nobody cares. Okay, so that is on data analytics. Okay, now you also have certain other things which are okay. So going back to the our diagram here. Any questions so far? Okay, if no questions, then let's do this. Okay, so there is something called cache. Okay, so what the caching means, what does cache mean? Okay, so yeah, okay. So let's say that a user is coming in and he wants to get some data. Okay, so if I go back to the previous example here, so the user comes in, he's going to a microservice saying, give me product information. Okay, so here I said, give me this t-shirt information. Okay, so I just pulled up all this information. That means this microservice just went to a database, did a select statement, and this returned the data and gave it to the user interface. Okay, now let's say you come to Amazon, you also click on the same thing. Okay, you say, hey, I also want to see this t-shirt information. What does a microservice do? It does the same thing. It goes to the database, does a select statement, gets a result, gives it to the user interface. Okay, now let's say that there are a lot of users that are coming in and looking up this information. Okay, now every time going to a database, executing these queries, it takes a considerable amount of time. In the sense, you have to be concerned about. I just looked up the information. Why do I need to look up the information? If I store this information somewhere locally, locally means within the system itself, within this microservice itself, I don't need to go to somewhere else to get the data. Okay, so that is where the caching comes into picture. Okay, so let's say the very first time a user comes in, request for t-shirt information. Okay, it looks up in the cache. Cache is like a local memory. Okay, it looks up in the local memory. It's not there. Okay, so you go to the database, you pull the data. Okay, the next user comes in. You don't go to the database because you already have it in local memory. Okay, so you go to the cache, you respond from the cache. The third user comes in, you look up in the cache, you respond from the cache. Okay, so the cache is nothing but a local memory. Okay, uh, it's not going to be the very first time I'm going to go to the database. Okay, but the next time you come for the same information or another user comes from the same information, I'm not going to go anywhere because I already have it locally. I'm going to return back from this service. Okay, within the cache. Okay, so that local memory is called caching. Okay, now there is something called a Redis cache. So the caching can come in many different flavors. Okay, so one of the software or I would say framework is a Redis cache. Okay, uh, yeah, you can see that this is a good picture here. Okay, yeah, forget about the other things. So you have some user. It can be a web desktop or client laptop, whatever it might be, or it can be a mobile device. Some user is coming in, interacting with your application through an API to the microservice. Okay, so he's interacting to this application. The first time I'm going to go to the database and I'm going to store this information in a cache. Okay, this cache, you can assume that these two are sitting on the same machine. Okay, application and cache are on the same machine. It's not on a different machine somewhere else. Okay, but this database is in a different machine somewhere else. Okay, I mean this cache can also be in a different machine, but most of the times it's sitting on the same machine. Okay, and yeah, so the next time the application needs the same information, it will look up from the cache and it will give back the data. Okay, so it's going to be much faster because the database load is also reduced. You also have the cache is in memory within the same machine, so you're not going to another machine. There is no round trip involved and all that. Okay, so this also increases the performance drastically. Okay, but the cache is not always a solution for performance because the database might have, let's say, 100 gigs of data. Okay, you cannot put 100 gigs of data in the cache all the time. So you have to store only the most recently used, or there has to be certain logic that goes into the cache that I'm going to store only the information that is going to reduce the round trips to the database. Okay. Now, how do I know which information is going to be reduced, which is going to reduce the round trips? So it depends on the application. Okay. So I want to store let's say the user information. What is the user address? What is the user this thing? Because it's not going to change very often. Okay, the product information. I'm going to store the product information. But if you say give me all orders, okay, so if I go back to the example of Amazon and I say show me all the orders and everything, I don't want to put that information in the cache because you might have ordered a new product, you might have placed a new order, and this cache is pretty outdated. That means I don't want to store that information in the cache. It's going to change very often. You can place new orders and so on. So anything that is changing, we don't want to put in the cache. Anything that is constant, static, like product information, user information, that is static. It's not going to, I mean, it does change. You might change your email address, you might change your address, but that is very rarely. That means most of the times it is static, but it does change very rarely. Okay, so those kind of information we want to put in a cache, but something that is dynamic, you don't want to cache that information. Okay, because it's pretty soon it will be outdated. You don't want to look up from the local memory and return that. Okay, so that is where the caching comes into picture. So you have a Redis cache. There is called memcache. Okay, that's another framework that can help you. Memcached. There's another framework that can help you with that. or in a very simple high level, you also can store it using some Python dictionaries kind of stuff and so on. But yeah, these are different caching mechanisms. Okay. All right. This is at a very high level. What are the different components you will be putting on your resumes? Okay. So you have JavaScript on the front end side, microservices on the middleware, databases on the back end. You have caching frameworks that can increase the processing or efficiency kind of stuff and so on. But yeah, these are the primary things that at a very high level you can talk about. Okay. Do you guys have any questions so far? I want to discuss few technical details now. Before I go there, I want you guys to be clear on the high level picture. Okay. If no questions, then let's go to the details right now. How many of you have PyCharm installed on your local desktop or PC, laptop, whatever it is, Mac or whatever it is, or the Python environment setup? If you don't have a Python environment setup, I can talk about that. But if everybody has a setup is already installed and everything, I don't want to spend time talking about that. Okay. All right. So few people don't have it. Let's talk about that then. Okay. So the very first thing I want you guys to do is install. Yeah, let's install Python, right? So go to Python and search for Python download. And the latest one is 3.9 something. Okay. So click on the Python download. 3.9 is the latest. You can install this if you want, or you can install 3.8 also. It's up to you which one you want. But I would say install the latest. Click on the download Python. Okay. So it will ask you to specify some directory. I'm going to just save it in my here. I have 3.7 or 3.8, but I'm doing an upgrade right now. Yeah, you can use VS Code also. But if you are working with Python, there are certain things PyCharm can offer. VS Code doesn't have few things. So I would say install PyCharm also, actually. Yeah. So let's go through this for now, okay? Let's install all the things that I'm talking about right now. So yeah, go to search for Python download. You're gonna get a link, and the first download option, click that. If you're on a Mac, you might have to select other options. But yeah, so click on that. I'm selecting a standard installation. Okay. So it's gonna take a minute. So while I'm doing this, I want you guys to also install in simultaneously. Okay. So for some of the C++ guys who are here, I would say still install this, because even if you are in C++, you need Python for few things. Okay. I mean, you may not be working day in, day out, but once in a while you might use Python also. So for C++ guys also install this. Okay. So this is done. So I'm just going to close this. And then, so once you have that, go for PyCharm download. Okay. So in PyCharm, there are two options. One is a community edition and the other one is a professional edition. Both of them are same, pretty similar. You don't have to have professional edition. Professional edition is you have to pay some money or things like those. You get for 30 days, but after 30 days, you have to pay certain money. And if your company can provide that, some organizations provide the professional version, but functionality wise, it's pretty much the same thing. There are one or two, I mean, there are minor differences, but for your daily use, this is more than enough. Okay. So go to community edition and download that. I already have PyCharm installed here. Okay. So I just started PyCharm. It's coming up. But I want you guys to install PyCharm also once you install Python 3.9. I'm going to try to share my second screen. Okay, so give me 1 second. Okay, so for some reason I cannot share my second screen. Okay, all right, no problem. So I already have PyCharm installed, but if not, for the guys who don't have PyCharm installed, do this right now. And when you're done, just put a message on the chat saying that you're done. This might take some time, maybe like a couple of minutes. I'm gonna wait here until you guys are done. Yeah, if you have VS Code, I would still say install PyCharm. There are some features that are available in PyCharm that are not in VS Code, and if you want to be in Python um, language, or if you want to be a Python professional, PyCharm is a must. Okay, so I would say install PyCharm. So debugging is much easier in PyCharm. Autocomplete is good in PyCharm. So if you type a letter, something like A, it will show all the functions that start with A, all the modules, and so on. Okay. So those kind of features are not in VS Code; they are in PyCharm. Okay. So install PyCharm. Okay. Anyone else still waiting to be uh, installed? Okay. All right. So let's open the PyCharm here. So when you open PyCharm, you're going to see some screen that is similar to this. Okay. So go to File, say New Python file. Okay. Click on that, and it asks for a name. Just say 6com or maybe whatever name you want. Okay. Tutorial 1. Tutorial underscore 1. Okay. So go to this option File and select New, and it will prompt all these options. Just select Python file. Okay. And enter a name, and that will put a .py in the very end. Okay, so you just put tutorial dot underscore 1, and it will automatically append .py to the end. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to get started here. All right. So Python, why Python is so so there are some good things about Python. There are some bad things about Python. Okay. The good thing is if you want to start learning some language, Python is pretty quick to learn. Okay. The bad thing is the performance-wise, Python is pretty bad compared to other languages. There are other things. Python has so many different modules and packages that you have to learn so much. So the learning curve, if you want to be an expert, it's also much longer in the sense compared to other languages like C++ or Java. C++, it's pretty static in the sense whatever you had in 1990s or 2000s, it's pretty much the same thing in 2020 also. The language itself is pretty much similar, okay? But if you want to do Python, there are many different packages, as we saw, Django, Flask, AWS frameworks. You have Redis cache, Memcache, different kind of modules. So you have to keep learning in Python. Okay, I mean it's not that you don't have to learn in C++ side also, but most of those are static, or in the sense I would say there's not much changes happening on those languages. Okay, Python is easy to get into, but once you get into there, you have to keep learning. Okay. All right. So the very first thing I'm gonna show you is how to, how to run a program here. Okay. So it's traditional that whenever you start a language, the first thing is hello world. Okay. So print hello world. By the way, can you guys see the screen here, font and everything? Maybe I can change the settings. Okay, color scheme. This is what I was looking for. Okay. Okay. All right. This is much better, right? Okay. I'm gonna increase the font size also. Okay. So here what I did is I have a statement here called print, and I put parentheses, and I put something called hello world. Okay. Now if I want to run this, I go to run and click on this third option, run dot dot dot. Okay. So whenever you see dot dot dot, that means there are more options. Okay. So when I click on that, okay, it gives you more options. These are the other options. Okay. So I'm just going to select this tutorial underscore one. Okay. So at the bottom, you can see that it actually tried to run it, and it actually ran a different program, which is soup.py. I don't want the soup.py. I don't know why it. Okay, let's run this again. Okay, okay. You can see that at the bottom, it shows you the output. Okay, so what it did is it ran this Python on this program. Okay, tutorial underscore one.py. Okay, and then this is the output that it got, which is hello world. Okay, so this hello world is coming from here. Okay, and every program in every operating system, whether it's Windows, Linux, Python, C++, anything it is, when you see exit code 0, that means it is success. There is no problem with running this program. Okay. If you see exit code non-zero, that means if you see 1, 2, -1, -5, whatever the option that is non-zero, that means that is an error code. Okay. If you see something like a 1, that means that error code 1 means something. Okay. Maybe your hard disk is not connected. Maybe your something else got a problem. Okay. So if you see anything non-zero, that means that's a problem. Okay. If you see 0, that means no error, nothing, everything is good. Okay. Uh, are you guys able to run this program? What I have here? Okay. Anybody having any issues? Let me know, and we can share your screen and we can see what the problem might be. Okay. So this it is a simple print statement. Okay. Now there are other things that you can do, obviously, but let's say you want to have print a number. Okay, print 20. Okay, so here I'm printing a number which is 20. Okay, so same thing, pretty much it will give me another output here which is showing me this is 20. Okay, but you can notice that there is a line, new line. So after hello world, it's putting a new line, and in the next statement it's printing 20. Okay, what if I want to print, I don't want to print a new line after this. Okay, you can say end equal to this space. Okay, you don't want to print a new line, but you just want to put a space at the after that statement. Okay, so if I run this program, you can see that hello world space 20. Okay, that means after hello world, it's not going to print a new line, it's going to put a space, and when I print the next statement 20, it's going to print right next to it. Okay, try this thing in your local PC or Python. Okay, another thing, if I say just P, okay, so you can see there's a drop down here. Okay, so PyCharm can offer these things. Okay, so this POW, the first one is a power function. So I can say power of 2 to the power 4. Okay, so again, I can do print of power 2 to the 4. And if I run that, it gives me 16. Okay, so here, as soon as I said P, it gave me all the options that start with the P, or there's a P somewhere in the function and all that. Okay, so if you had VS Code, this I haven't seen this in VS Code. Maybe you can configure it. I'm not sure, but you have to do something else for that. Okay, PyCharm comes with built-in. You don't have to do anything extra, and this is built for Python language. So it will give you exactly the Python functions, Python functionality, and it can help you develop much faster. Okay, and you can see here print. Okay. So the print function here has values, it has a separator, it has an end, and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to remember what a function does. Okay, so you can just look up for the information from this drop down itself. Okay, so there's a zip function which takes a iterator and all that. Okay, so you can, yeah, open function that you can open up a file and all those different stuff that you can do. Okay, so PyCharm gives you this flexibility that you don't have to remember the function, and pretty much it gives you the option of drop down. Okay, function drop down. This is called autocomplete. Okay, it tries to autocomplete. So I say P R, and I can press tab. Okay, when I press tab, it automatically does the autocomplete. Okay, so this is one good thing about PyCharm. Okay, all right. So let's move on. Okay, now I can say x equal to um, something like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now I can also say x equal to 4, 5, 6. Okay. You can see that the first statement, or let me just say y. Okay. So the first statement x equal to, that's a string. String means it's a character. Okay. So I can put some characters, I can put some numbers, whatever I want, that's a string. Okay. The next one, 4, 5, 6 is a numeric. Okay. Number. Okay. So when you put hash in Python, that's a comment. Okay, that's not part of the code. That's just a comment. Okay, give me 1 second, guys. Okay, all right. So whenever you put a hash there, that's a comment. Okay, you can have a multi-line comment also in Python. Okay, so if you put like 3 quotes, you can put whatever you want here. Okay, so I can say this is a demo for 6com BCG consultants. Okay, so we can do whatever you want. Okay, this is a demo Python. I can say whatever I want. Okay, so this, all these lines become a comment. This is not code. Okay, so anything you put 3 quotes, 3 double quotes, 3 single quotes, that becomes a comment. Okay, that's not part of the code. So if I run this, Okay, so this has no impact. Even this has no impact. Okay, these hashes here, comments. Okay, so this is a multi-line comment, and this is a single line comment. Okay, if I try to go to the next line, this hash will not follow. Okay, so that's the hash is pretty much starting from here. That means the comment is starting from here, and then we write this. Okay, and also let's do this. Okay, yeah. So you can see that there is a Python has a standard of how you should be writing good code. Okay, so that standard is called PEP standard. Okay, it's called PEP 8. Okay, so you can see that PEP 8 pretty much means that that's the standard of how you should write the code. Okay, so you can see that after hash, I put a space there. Okay, that is how you are supposed to write comments. You have to put a hash and then a space. If I don't have a space, you can see that PyCharm puts a line underneath. Okay, so that says inline comment should start with hash space. So it says that, and you can also see it says why pep8. Pep8 means that's a standard that says how you should write your code, and that says that after hash you need to have a space for better readability. Okay, so this is done automatically by PyCharm. Okay, so this also helps you write good code. Okay, all right. So I'm going to remove this, or I'm going to move this to the top. So here we have x equal to, this is a string, and y equal to 456. Okay, it's a number. Now the good thing about Python, or you can even say bad thing, is you don't specify what is the type of x, what is the type of y. Okay, so if it's like a C language or C++ or Java, you have to say int x equal to 456 or into y equal to 456. Okay, and then you also have a semicolon in the end. Okay, or you say if it's a string, you say string x equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so Python is called a dynamic typing language. The type you don't specify, you just assign what value you want. Okay, so that is dynamic. These are all static types. Okay, that means you specify exactly what type you want. This is an integer. Okay, and then if I do next statement, something like hello, this will give me an error because y is declared as an integer type and I'm trying to assign a string. So this will throw a compiler warning. Okay, compiler error actually, not even a warning. Okay, so this will not even compile if it's C++, Java, C language, or any other language. Okay, those are all static languages, static type languages. This is dynamic dynamic typing Python. So in the next statement, I can say x equal to 456, or let's assign something else. Okay, 765. Okay, that means in this statement, x is a string type. In the next statement, x is a numeric type. Here, y is a numeric type. Okay, so this is fine. This will work fine in Python. Okay, but in other languages, that's not allowed. Okay, so the advantage with there are some pros and cons. One of the pro is that let's say you make a mistake. Instead of putting double quotes, you don't have double quotes. Okay, so that's a problem because if you add, yeah, let's add 45. Okay, and I say print x. Okay, or let me do this, print x equal to x plus 45, and I'm doing this. Okay, so let me comment all this code. Oh, by the way, you can just highlight whatever you want and you can press control and the forward slash. Okay, control plus slash, it will comment automatically. Okay, PyCharm. So you just highlight and control slash will uncomment. You can see the comments are gone, and I press control slash again, it comments out. Okay, if you're a Mac user, I think you need to press that control also, but it's a different, not control, command. I think it's command plus this. But yeah, you can find out in Mac what are the shortcuts. So yeah, just control and forward slash, and that will comment the whole the code there. Okay. So let's say that you have this x equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. I did x plus 45. Okay. Or let me do this. Okay. Y equal to 45. Okay, and then I said x equal to x plus y, and I'm printing X. Okay, so the question is this okay? Is this an error? Can you guys take a guess? Will this work fine, or will this give me an error?
Error.
You can answer it in the chat, or you can unmute and you can answer it.
It is an error.
Okay, so why is it an error?
Different types.
Yep, that's correct. Yep. Yeah, one of them is a number, the other one is a string, and you're trying to concatenate different types. That's correct. Yeah. So you cannot add those two numbers. Okay, I mean different types. So that is a error there. Okay, so that, I mean, you get the error when you run the code, right? When you run the code, that's when it says, hey, you cannot add these two things. But in other languages, you don't even need to run the code. Okay, if you have something like this, 456 plus hello, or something similar equivalent, y equal to x plus or y equal to y plus something else, different type. Okay, so you don't even need to run the code. You can just, the compiler will tell you right away that, hey, you're trying to add those two things. That's not valid, man. You cannot even build this code. Okay, you cannot even compile the code. But in Python, I have to run the code. Let's say this code is in a different file somewhere else, somebody else modified. You don't have access to the file. You run your code is working fine. You're calling somebody else's code, and that is throwing an error. Okay, because he didn't test it properly and all that. Okay, so Python has this drawback that unless you run the code, you're not going to get the error. But in other languages, it's guaranteed that it's supposed to work. You're not going to get an error when you run the code because you already compiled beforehand. Okay, so that's one. I would say uh, for development, it's going to be much faster in the sense you can just type whatever you want. But when you run the code, you're going to get an error. In other languages, you have to be careful with what you're doing and so on. The compiler will catch that and will throw an error right away. Yeah, I mean, these are the pros and cons. Okay, but anyways, so going back here. Okay, so we are running close to 6:45. I'm going to talk for another 10-15 minutes, but we're going to continue maybe in the next sessions. So another 10-15 minutes, and then we'll end this. Okay. Yeah, so here what I'm doing is I have a string 1, 2, 3, 4. I have a 4, 5. I'm adding those two, and then I'm assigning to back to the X. Okay. So you can see at the bottom of the output window here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I added two strings. So this is string concatenation. Okay. Plus what it does is you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you have 4, 5. So it's going to add those two, in the sense concatenate those two, and it's going to give me that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is do the same thing, but with numbers. Okay. So I'm going to remove this 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is not a string anymore. 4, 5, and do the same thing. Okay. So you're going to see the difference here. Okay. So for the first print, it printed 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4, 5. That means it's appended to the string type. Okay. Now the next case, I said X is not a number. X is not a string, but it's a number. Okay. And then I said Y equal to 4, 5. And then I added these two and I printed it. Okay, so I get 1279 because 1234 plus 45 is 1279. Okay, so you can see the type of the data types are derived at runtime. Okay, so that's what we call dynamic typing. Okay, that means based on what you're trying to do, it will change the types, it will assume the types and all that. Okay, so that is dynamic typing. The other languages are static typing. The other languages are like C, C++, Java, and so on. Okay, so those are all static typing. Okay, so now coming back to this, so we saw what a print statement does, how to assign a variable, how to add these things and so on. Okay. Similarly, you can guess. You also have a minus operator. Okay. Minus can subtract. There's no. I don't think there's a minus operator for a string, but let's give it a try. Okay. Yeah. There's no minus operator for a string. Yeah. Okay. Oh, by the way, actually, PyCharm caught it right away. So as soon as I put minus, you can see. Okay. PyCharm didn't complain. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. It did actually give an error. Class str doesn't define the minus operator, so it cannot be used. Okay. Fine. Okay. All right. So we saw the different type of operators, plus, minus, strings, and so on. Okay, so there are other things also. So you can all have decimal numbers also, 5, 6, 7, or whatever you want, and then you can add those two things. That will work fine. Expected, right? So this is expected. It's going to give you the decimal operation. Now, one thing I want to show is, let's say you have x equal to 20, okay, and y equal to 4, or let's take 20 and 3, okay, and I'm going to say print x divided by y. Okay. Uh, can you guys guess what the output will be? Will it be, let's take 10, right? Okay. 10 divided by 3 is actually 3.3333 and all that. Or will it be just 3? Because both of them are integers. Am I supposed to get a 3, or will I get 3.33 and all that? It looks like you guys are trying to run it without running the code. Just take a guess. Okay. All right. So it's going to be 3.33. This is what going to be printed. So if I run this, so you can see at the bottom 3.333, all that. Okay. So if you did the same code in Python 2, okay, so this is Python 3.9 or 3.8 something. But if you did the same thing in print x divided by y with, in Python 2, which is the older version of Python, you'll get 3. The result will be 3. Okay. If it's Python 3, the result is 3 point, whatever we saw there, 3.333, all that. Okay. So this is the crazy thing about Python. They change the functionality when they upgrade. So when you're in Python 2, it works one way. When you change to different version, it will change the result, how it operates internally, and so on. So some of the companies are scared that if they upgrade the Python version, something else is going to break. And there are so many projects out there that are still in Python 2, and they want to upgrade to Python 3, but they don't know, uh, because they have hundreds of files. There are so many operations within those files that somebody has to go there and see what's going to break if you upgrade the Python. Okay, so there is a lot of effort that was put in from upgrading from Python 2 to 3. So you might see some job descriptions out there saying, hey, we are trying to migrate from Python 2 to 3. It's a migration project. We need someone who can help us with this, and so on. So you need to know what changed from Python 2 to 3. Okay, so there are many things that change from Python 2 to 3. But yeah, this is one of the things. If you divide two integers, you're going to get an integer in Python 2. But if you divide two integers in Python 3, you're going to get a decimal number back. Okay. There are other things that changed also. But these are certain things these are few things that you have to take care of when you're migrating. Okay. Okay. So that is dividing two integers. Now you also have other data types. We saw string type, numeric type, a decimal type, and all that. Okay. You also have something called a list. Okay. A list is pretty much a container of elements. You can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is pretty much a list of values. Okay. So this is a list of values. Okay. Now, since Python is dynamic typing, I can also say x equal to, and then I can also say hello, or this is a string. Okay, so I can mix and match. I can say a purely numeric list column, or I can say some of them are numeric, some of them are decimals, uh, or some of them are strings. Okay, you can even have another list inside. Okay, list has another list inside. Okay, this can be 56.5 and 56 and so on. Okay, but we'll come back to list in a list later on. But pretty much here the list says, since Python doesn't care about the type, I can store anything I want inside a list. Okay, since it's dynamic typing. Okay, so that is a list. List is pretty much a container of elements. Okay, or a list of elements. So when I say print x here, you're gonna get the same output that I have there. So 1, 2, 3, all that. Hello, this is string 34.5 and all that. Okay. Any questions so far? If I'm going too fast, let me know. Okay, all right. So that is a list, right? Now there are certain operations that you can do on a list. Okay, so if I want the numbers, just these numbers. Okay, so 1 to 6. So in Python, just like any other languages, this is a zeroth element. This is the first element, the second element, and all that. Okay, so starts from 0. So if I say print x of 0, okay, so as you guys can guess, this will print the first element 1. Okay, and if I say print x of 2 or 3, that will print the fourth element. Okay, so if I run this, so you can see that x of 0 printed 1, x of 3 is the fourth element. Okay, so it prints this guy. Okay, okay, now I'm also going to say print, I want to print from here to here. Okay, I can say x starting from 0, go all the way to 6. Okay, 6 means sixth element, which is the seventh element. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sixth element is a string. So this is not including. Okay, so that means start, end. Okay, start is including, include start, exclude end. Okay, so it's going to exclude the whatever the index that you specify, but it's going to include this element. Okay, so if I print this, you're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, but the seventh element is excluded. Okay, because it doesn't take the end into consideration. Okay, it excludes the end but includes the start. Okay, so what if I want to do something like this, x of this. Okay, that pretty much means start to end, but I haven't specified what is the start and end. Can you guys yeah, take a guess what it might print? Or is it an error, or is it okay? Everything, that's correct. So it's going to print no, it's going to print everything, because if you don't specify start, by default the start is the starting element, by default end is the last element, or last but one, or last plus one. Okay, that means it's going to include everything. Okay, so if I don't specify anything, it's going to print everything. Okay, so that is so people coming from other languages, this gets tricky. Okay, so how is that working? You didn't specify a start and end. If you don't specify a start and end, start is the 0 and end is the last plus 1. Okay, that means end is going to go all the way until here. Okay, and what if I specify something like this, x of 2, this. Okay, is that okay? Is that error? Yep, it works. It works because it's going to start from the third element. Okay, and it's going to go all the way to the end. Because anytime you specify, it's going to take that. So in this case, start is 2, second index. Okay, and you haven't specified, so it's going to take last plus 1, which is the default value. Okay, so I'm going to run this. You can see it started from 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Okay, and what if I do this, print x of -1? Okay, is that an error, or is it okay? Negative index. Okay, what does that print? That's correct. It prints the last element. That's correct. So in Python, A negative index pretty much means that it's going to start from the end. Okay, when you say -1, it's going to print the last element. Okay, so you can see it prints 34.5. Okay, and the same thing if you do x of -3. Okay, that means it's going to print starting from the last 1, 2, 3. That means it's going to print the hello. Okay, okay, you can see it prints hello. Okay, now same thing. I can leverage the negative indices. I can say print last 2 elements. Okay, so I can say last start from there, and I can go all the way to here. Okay, let's print that. Oh, sorry, it should be -3 because the start is always less than the end. Okay, so if I do that, it's going to go from hello, this is string last 2 elements. Okay, actually, hold on. Yeah, the end is not included. Okay, so I'm going to exclude that. Yep. So this is what you have. Okay, if I want to print the last one, I have to also put 0 there. What? Hold on. Okay, so with negative indices, it's getting tricky, right? So if I want to print the last one, I have to exclude that. Okay, fine. So the end is not included. So when I put -1, it was excluding that. Okay, all right. So if I want to print the last 3 elements, this is what I'm going to do. Okay, so sometimes you may want to access the last few elements. So in those kind of cases, you put a colon with whatever the start. Since it's negative indices is going to start from the end, you're going to say, I want last 3 elements or so on using that. Okay. Now I have all these elements. Okay. Uh, this, I can also do something like this. Okay. Print x of colon 2. Okay. So I have 2 colons now. What does that mean by putting this colon 2? What does that print? Right. So that prints consecutive numbers. That's correct. So uh, the format is that start, end, and then you have an increment. Okay. So start by default is 0. Okay. End by default is last element. Okay. Last plus 1 or last element. Okay. Increment by default is 1. Okay. So if I don't specify anything, so that's going to print all the elements of the list. Okay. So you can see it prints all the elements. Okay. Now, if I say, because the increment is 1, it's going every next element and so on. Okay. Now, if I put 2 here, it's going to skip every one other element. Okay. So you can see it prints 1, it skipped 2 because the next increment is start plus increment, which is 2. Okay. So it skipped, went to the second index, which is number 3. Okay. And then it added another 2. It went to the fifth element and so on. Okay. So you can see that that is the increment that is happening there. Okay. All right. Now, what if I put -1 there? What does that do? That's right, decrement. But what is it? What does that print? Come back. Exactly right. So it's going to print the reverse of the string. So this is um tricky, or yeah, this is something coming from other languages or so on. Python gets tricky in this kind of scenarios. Okay, so you can see that when I say -1, it just changed the start to the last and end to the beginning kind of stuff. Okay, because the increment is -1 and all that. Okay, so what it did, it started from the end. Where was our list? Okay, so it started from the end and started going all the way to the back. So you can see 34.5 and all that. So when I say increment is -1, it's starting from the end and coming to the beginning of the string. Okay, all right. So that's the list extraction and all that. Okay, so you might also get this interview questions like, hey, given a list, how do you reverse the list? Or a palindrome question, right? A palindrome is pretty much If you go from the beginning to the end or end to the beginning, it's a palindrome. Okay, so if you have something like, let me look up a palindrome example. Okay, give a simple example. Okay, so let's take the civic. Okay, so I have a string called civic. Okay, so the interview question will be like, hey, can you tell me whether a given string is a palindrome or not? Okay, so x equal to civic. How do I reverse this string? So what is a palindrome? Palindrome is if you go from front to back or back to forward, it's the same string. Okay, so if I want to reverse the string, I can just do this x of minus minus 1, right? So that will give me the reverse of the string. So I can just say x equal to reverse of the string, print, and that is my palindrome function. Okay, so that tells me whether it's a palindrome or not. And you can see that says true. Okay, so this is the reverse of a string, and this is the actual string itself. So I'm comparing the reverse of the string with the string, and that tells me whether it's a function or whether it's true or false. By the way, Python has a Boolean type that is true. You can also have something called a false. Those are Boolean types. Okay. Um, so if I say something like if x, okay, and then I can say, yeah. So I'm going to say this: if x equal to x of minus 1, I'm going to say print. This is palindrome. Else print not a palindrome. Okay. So another thing to notice, yeah. So I'm going to talk about a few things here, and I'm going to end after this maybe. So here what I have is a if condition. So this is how you check for conditions. Okay, if x, whatever the condition you want, and then you put a colon there. Okay, and in other languages you have something like opening parenthesis, closing parenthesis, and so on. In Python you don't have that. Everything is based on a space. Okay, so if you put a tab there, that means this is part of this guy. Okay, and then you say else. Else means this has finished. The if is finished. Okay, this else now. Okay, and then whatever you put there has to be space separated again. So this becomes a part of the else block. Okay, so I'm going to say put another print here. This is part of if block. Okay, print this also. Okay, so all these three statements are part of the if block. So if this condition is satisfied, that means it's going to print these three statements. Okay, this is part of else block. Okay, so you can see that everything is separated by space. Now suddenly if I have something like this, okay, print this is not part of if else. Okay, so this, since I don't have a space here, this is not part of the if else. Okay, so this is outside the if else. So everything is space separated in Python. Okay, in other languages you might have opening parentheses and closing parentheses. You can even put this in the same line. Okay, or you can put it in the beginning of the line. It doesn't matter because the compiler knows that you have an opening curly brace, you have a closing curly brace, and all that. Okay, in Python you don't have that. You just use the space as your operator. Okay, okay. And if I run this code, so here I have x equal to false. Actually, this is crazy. Yeah. So I said false, and I'm using this operator, and it gave me an error. Exit code 1. Okay. Yeah. So it should have told me that you're trying to do something. I don't see an error message. Oh, okay. So I see trace callback, line 45. Okay. So here is line 45, and you're trying to do this. Bool object is not subscriptable and all that. Okay. So I'm going to remove this. Oh, let me comment that out. Okay. Okay. So if I run that, this is not part of if else. So here I have, yeah, so here I have civic, which is a palindrome. So it is printing this a palindrome. This is also part of if block and all these three statements. Okay. And then once the if block is done, it went here and it printed something like this, not part of if else. Okay, so that is how you check for conditions and how you space separate the statements within a block. Okay, so those are if else conditions and all that. Okay, now what if I do this? Okay, so uh, I don't have that. I just say this. Okay, if x, and I have x value as a string, civic. Will this print the if block or will this print the else block? Take a guess and tell me. So here x equal to civic, and I'm just saying if x. What does that mean? Is it going to go to the else if block or else block? It's correct. If it's going to go to the if block, because anything that is not false, not zero, not none, uh, not a blank string, it is all these are false. Okay, anything that is not that is true. Okay, so x is not a blank string, x is not zero, x is not none, x is not false, so that is true. Okay, now let me do this. X equal to 0. Okay, now as you guys can guess, x0 is a false. Okay, so it will print this guy. Okay, so if I run that, so you can see not a palindrome. Okay, so it prints not a palindrome block. Okay, so if I say x equal to none, by the way, there is a none variable, none type. That means there is no value for x. Okay, okay, so you can see that not a palindrome, so it's going to the else block. Okay, so if I have x equal to 0, sorry, I already tested for 0. uh, yeah, x equal to false or x equal to 1 or x equal to 5. Okay, 5 is not 0, not none, not false, not blank string, so this should go to the if block. Okay, so you can see this is a palindrome block. Okay, so it's going to the if block, and I'm going to put a blank string, x equal to blank, and I do that, so it's going to go to not a palindrome. So blank string is not a true value, so it goes here. Okay, so these are some things that you might have to remember. Anything that is false, zero, none, or a blank string will evaluate to false. Okay, anything that is not any one of these, it's going to be true. Okay, all right, any questions so far? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys some simple problem solving things. So you guys can solve it and send it to my email at vasu@bcgnj.com. So note this email. Note down this email. By the way, regarding the timings, are you guys okay with the Saturday 5 p.m.? I might also take a Sunday class. I haven't decided yet. So for now, I'm gonna go with Saturday 5 p.m. Is that time okay with you guys, or do you guys have a preference? So weekends is the best time for me. Weekdays I'm pretty busy, but weekends is something I can spend 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Okay, all right. So you guys are okay with the weekend, so I'm gonna go with Saturday 5 p.m. Sunday I haven't decided, but I'm gonna tell Praveen or someone, and you guys gonna get notified if there is a Sunday class. But this Sunday I'm not gonna have a class. Okay, maybe next Saturday, Sunday I'm gonna have 2 classes, 2 hours on Saturday, 2 hours on Sunday. But for now there is no class tomorrow. Okay. So the problem, what I want you guys to do is simple, a few things. Okay, declare a few variables of different types. Okay. Um, okay, one of them is a string type, integer type, boolean type. Okay, declare a string file path, something like the C colon users, whatever your username, kind of stuff, and then you're gonna have directory 1, directory 2, and all that. Okay, so that file path is a string. Okay, now Yeah, check for condition, check for above variable. If there is a path, print it. If there is no path in the above variable, okay, let me write to the next line. If there is no path in the above variable, print a message saying, hey, you don't have a path in there. Okay. By the way, there's another function called input. Okay. So whenever you say input, that is gonna read certain things. Okay. So when I say x equal to input, okay, it's gonna wait. It's gonna ask the user for the input. Okay. So if I run this program, so at the bottom, actually, let me comment all this code. Okay. Input, and I'm gonna say enter some string. Okay. So I'm gonna run this. It's waiting for my input. I'm gonna say. All right. So here I'm gonna run this program. Okay. So you can see that it says enter some string. Okay. So it's waiting for me to type something. Okay. So I'm gonna say tutorial. Okay. That's it. Done. And then I'm gonna say print x. Okay. On this. Okay. Since I'm printing it back, you can see that it prints the same value. So anything that you get from an input will be assigned to this variable x, and here I'm printing the variable x. Okay. So what I want you guys to do is declare a string file path whatever. Okay. Declare a string variable. Okay. That is the first thing, and the second thing is take input file path, or take file path from input and see if it is a string type. You don't know it's a string type. Okay. If it is blank or not. Yeah, you cannot have a blank input. So let's say, yeah, just print the size of the string, or if it's a if there is some path in the variable or not. Okay, fine. You can do that. Okay. Okay. After that, I actually wanted to talk about loops, for loops, while loops, and so on. Probably we'll discuss in the next session. Yeah, this is more of giving you a picture of how you guys can understand, talk to the vendors and all that. But in the next class, we'll go into more details about different programming concepts, loops, functions, lists, dictionaries, tuples, sets. We're also going to write a function that can read from a file, write to a file, and all that. It's pretty easy actually using Python. So I'm going to paste this in the chat window. Actually, I have to paste the email also. All right, so I'm going to stop here. But in the next session, we're going to get into more details. But at least you have some knowledge of how to talk to the vendors and what technologies are in your resume, and you have some idea, so you can talk better now. Okay. If you guys have any questions, I can take now. If you guys don't have any questions, then probably I can end this right here. All right. So if you guys don't have any questions, then I'm going to stop here. You guys enjoy your rest of the weekend. Okay. So the next class I'm going to send through Praveen or somebody through your recruiter. I'm going to notify you guys when the next class is going to be. But Saturday 5 p.m. is confirmed. Sunday is going to be decided. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, Ravi. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.